Hello, friends! In today's video, we're diving into the top 10 poorest countries in the world in 2024. Despite global wealth, many nations continue to struggle with extreme poverty. We'll be ranking these countries based on their GDP per capita, giving us a clearer picture of their economic conditions. But first, let's understand what GDP per capita means and how countries are ranked. What is GDP per capita? GDP stands for Gross Domestic Product, which measures the total value of goods and services a country produces annually. To determine how rich or poor a country is, we divide this by the population size to get GDP per capita. However, GDP per capita only tells part of the story, as the cost of living and inflation can vary greatly between countries. That's where PPP comes in. What is PPP? PPP, or Purchasing Power Parity, considers local costs and inflation rates, giving us a more accurate comparison of living standards across nations. So, when we rank countries based on GDP per capita adjusted by PPP, we get a clearer sense of how people are really living. Before we jump into the list, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest content. Now, let's explore the top 10 poorest countries in the world in 2024. Number 10, Madagascar. GDP per capita, PPP, $1,635. Madagascar is a large island nation blessed with natural beauty and biodiversity. However, despite its rich resources, it remains economically challenged. About 75% of the population lives on less than $1.9 a day, and over 25 million people live below the international poverty line. The country is especially vulnerable to cyclones, droughts, and rising sea levels, all of which worsen food insecurity. Malnutrition affects a staggering 50% of children under 5, leading to developmental challenges. Many families rely on slash-and-burn farming, which has caused widespread deforestation, leaving only 10% of Madagascar's original rainforest intact. Additionally, infrastructure is severely underdeveloped. Only 11% of roads are paved, and access to sanitation and clean water is limited, with only half the population able to access safe drinking water. Addressing these challenges, especially in agriculture and infrastructure, could help lift millions of Madagascans out of poverty. Number 9, Chad. GDP per capita, PPP, $1,590. Chad is one of the largest countries in Africa, but its vast desert landscape makes farming difficult, and its economy is vulnerable to drastic weather changes. In one year, the country might face severe drought, and the next, devastating floods. These unpredictable climate patterns cripple the agricultural sector, which is crucial for the majority of its people. Chad also suffers from a lack of basic services, with only 345 doctors serving the entire country, a ratio of just 0.4 doctors per 10,000 people. The country's low literacy rate, about 33% of adults, further impedes its progress, as education is key to development. Chad heavily depends on oil exports, but the collapse of oil prices in 2014 triggered an economic recession that halted many public service projects. The country's reliance on a single resource leaves it vulnerable to global market fluctuations, perpetuating the cycle of poverty. Number 8, Liberia. GDP per capita, PPP, $1,528. Liberia is rich in natural resources like gold, diamonds, and rubber, yet remains one of the world's poorest countries due to prolonged political conflict and corruption. The nation endured 14 years of civil war, which claimed over 200,000 lives and devastated the economy. Even after the war ended, Liberia struggled to rebuild, and much of the country's infrastructure is still in shambles. Corruption remains widespread, with government officials often accused of misusing the country's wealth for personal gain. Roads are poorly maintained, and many rural communities are cut off from basic services like healthcare and education. A shocking 64% of the population lives below the poverty line, and malnutrition is rampant, affecting children's health and development. Reforms to improve governance and reduce corruption could help Liberia better utilize its natural resources for the benefit of its people. Number 7, Burkina Faso. GDP per capita, PPP, $1,423. Burkina Faso, located in West Africa, is a landlocked country where poverty is deeply entrenched, especially in rural areas. About 90% of its poor population lives in rural communities that rely heavily on agriculture, but irregular rainfall and outdated farming methods lead to food shortages and malnutrition. Political instability also exacerbates the situation, as frequent coups and power struggles disrupt the economy. Despite some economic growth, about 40% of the population still lives under the poverty line, and food insecurity remains a constant threat. Access to healthcare and education is limited, especially in rural areas. Schools lack resources, and many children drop out early to work and support their families. Efforts to modernize agriculture and stabilize the political environment could help reduce poverty levels in the coming years. Number 6, Niger. GDP per capita, PPP, $1,398. Niger, located at the edge of the Sahara Desert, faces enormous challenges due to rapid population growth and frequent droughts. The birth rate is among the highest in the world, with each woman giving birth to an average of 7.4 children. This growing population puts strain on the country's limited resources and social services. Illiteracy is widespread, and many women lack access to family planning services. Agriculture, the backbone of Niger's economy, suffers from droughts, which lead to food shortages. The country is still feeling the effects of the 2010 drought, which left many families struggling to survive. Additionally, security issues with militant groups like Boko Haram have further destabilized the region, causing displacement and economic hardship. Improving education and access to healthcare, as well as addressing the security situation, could help Niger climb out of poverty. Number 5, Somalia. GDP per capita, PPP, $1,302. Somalia has faced decades of conflict, drought, and economic instability. A large portion of the country's population depends on agriculture and livestock, but frequent droughts have devastated crops and left many in need of humanitarian aid. In some regions, starvation is a real threat, and in just 2 days, 110 people died from hunger in a single village. Somalia's rural population is particularly affected by the droughts. Many people travel on foot to the capital, Mogadishu, in search of food, and along the way, some children die from starvation. The lack of infrastructure, especially in healthcare, means that diseases like malaria and respiratory infections are widespread. International aid and rebuilding efforts could provide relief, but Somalia will need lasting peace and political stability to address its deep-rooted poverty issues. Number 4, South Sudan. GDP per capita, PPP, $1,204. South Sudan is the world's youngest country, gaining independence in 2011, but it has been plagued by conflict and corruption ever since. Over 66% of the population lives in extreme poverty, and access to basic services like healthcare and clean water is severely limited. The country is landlocked and difficult to reach, which hinders foreign investment and humanitarian aid. During the rainy season, many roads become impassable, cutting off access to crucial supplies and services. Corruption is also rampant, with officials diverting public funds for personal use, leaving the rest of the population to suffer. In terms of healthcare, immunization rates are extremely low, leading to high infant mortality rates. Literacy is also a major issue, especially among women, where 60% of the population is illiterate. Addressing corruption and improving access to education and healthcare will be key to South Sudan's development. Number 3, Democratic Republic of the Congo. GDP per capita, PPP, $1,288. Despite being rich in natural resources like cobalt, copper, and diamonds, the DRC remains one of the poorest countries in the world. Over 73% of the population lives on less than $1.90 a day. The country's wealth has been squandered due to decades of political instability, war, and corruption. The DRC's poor infrastructure makes it difficult to exploit its resources effectively, and much of the country's wealth benefits only a small elite. Meanwhile, millions of people are displaced, living in camps with little access to food, clean water, or health care. Rebuilding the country's institutions and investing in infrastructure could help the DRC take advantage of its natural wealth and reduce poverty. Number 2, Central African Republic. GDP per capita, PPP, $1,205. The Central African Republic is rich in natural resources like oil, diamonds, and gold, yet over 71% of its population lives below the poverty line. Ongoing conflict between ethnic and religious groups has displaced hundreds of thousands of people, making it difficult to maintain stability and grow the economy. Malaria, HIV, and malnutrition are among the leading causes of death, and the healthcare system is woefully underdeveloped. In addition, the country has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the world, with 882 deaths per 100,000 live births. With better governance and international support, the Central African Republic could begin to harness its resources for the benefit of its people. Number 1. Burundi. GDP per capita, PPP, $732. Topping the list as the poorest country in the world in 2024 is Burundi. The country has endured multiple civil wars, leaving its economy in ruins. Political instability, corruption, and a fast-growing population have made it difficult for Burundi to recover. About 64.9% of the population lives below the poverty line, with many families surviving on less than $1.90 a day. Food insecurity is rampant due to limited arable land and frequent droughts. Malnutrition affects over 50% of children, and access to clean drinking water is scarce in many regions. Moreover, healthcare and education systems are severely underfunded. Efforts to improve governance, reduce corruption, and invest in agriculture could help Burundi break free from the cycle of poverty. That's it for today's list. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe for more insightful content. What are your thoughts on the top 10 poorest countries in the world? Share them in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.